Hello everyone, welcome to the Applied Crypto session of NDSS 2024. May I now invite the first speaker, Junoka from KL Leuven, for his talk, Efficient and Timely Revocation of V2X Credentials.
Okay, hello everybody. My name is Gianluca, and this work is a collaboration between Ericsson, KU Leuven, and ULB. And as the name says, this is about V2X. So V2X stands for Vehicle to Everything, and it is a technology that allows the communication between vehicles and also between vehicles and other entities like pedestrians or infrastructure. And this communication is used for enhanced use cases like traffic congestion or automated driving. Of course, this communication is sensitive, and we want to protect it as much as possible. Because if we have a malicious participant in this network that transmits malicious information, this can lead to some accidents and also danger to humans as well. So it's also a safety issue. So if we look into more details at this communication, we have typically a sender that sends a message to a receiver or multiple receivers. And this message contains some information about the sender, for example, speed or location or direction. And the message also contains some metadata that the receiver has to verify when receiving a message before processing it. And first of all, there is a digital signature, typically. And this is used to provide some authenticity and integrity guarantees to the message. So this also implies that all the vehicles have credentials that are used for making the signatures and also for verifying them. Other metadata are also needed to be checked, and for this paper we are only focusing on timestamp. So these timestamps are used for giving freshness information to all these messages. And it's quite simple. Basically, the timestamp of the message is checked against the current time. And if the difference is higher than a certain tolerance that is given by this parameter TV here, then the message is considered old and it's discarded. If the sender becomes compromised at any point in time, this also means that all the content of these messages might get completely attacker controlled. And in this case, we need a way for the receiver to identify that this is a malicious message and to discard it. And so for this, we need to revoke the credentials that are used by the attacker in this case. And in V2X, we follow two main approaches. The first approach is called active revocation. And this basically means that we have a certificate revocation list that we distribute to all the vehicles. And this is used when a receiver receives a message from a sender. It checks the signature against this certificate revocation list to check if this is a valid signature or not. But this, of course, is increasing the time to verify every message, so it incurs some latency. So it's not an optimal solution for V2X, because we have real-time constraints here. The other approach, which is quite the opposite, let's say, it's called passive revocation. Here, we don't have any certificate revocation list, but the idea is that all these credentials used by the vehicles are short-lived. And the idea is that they have to be renewed periodically. And if we have a revocation, we basically deny new certificates to that revoked vehicle. But this also implies that the attacker will be able to continue operating until the credentials have expired. So there is a window of malicious activity by the attacker, which in some cases is not small. So in the research, there is an alternative approach, which is called self-revocation. And this relies on trusted computing to work. So trusted computing here is used in the vehicles. So we are putting a trusted element in each vehicle, or also called trusted component, that is responsible for managing these credentials. So these credentials are kept isolated from the rest of the system. And there is some access control that manages requests from the outside, for example, making a signature or verifying a message. And the idea of self-revocation is quite simple. It works by having a revocation request for a specific vehicle that is sent around to all the vehicles. And then this request is supposed to be forwarded to the corresponding trusted components. And then only the trusted component of that specific vehicle will react and will revoke the credentials, while the others will just discard the message. So it's a quite simple idea, and of course it has some issues. And namely, if this request is blocked in the network, or if it's not forwarded to a trusted component, there will be no revocation. So, of course, this is quite an issue for this approach. And this is where our work comes in, because we are taking this idea and we want to make it work. So here, our first goal is to guarantee revocation and also guarantee an upper bound. So we want to say that if we revoke a vehicle or a credential at a certain time, we want to guarantee that it takes at most this time to revoke. We also want to make this scheme usable in practice, which also means that we want to make it resistant against network delays, network interruptions, or all the real-world conditions. And finally, we want to keep the overhead as small as possible, because V2X has real-time constraints to keep in mind. We are not making any assumptions on having a trusted time source in the TCs. And this is the constant that we have, because it's a common issue in modern technologies like trusted execution environments, for example. And another constraint that we have is that the TC is just a passive device, which means that it's just a processing request coming from the untrusted host, gives back a response. But the scheduling itself for the trusted computing is completely controlled by the untrusted host and possibly by the attacker. And our approach is based on periodic messages that are called heartbeats. And this is an idea that was already proposed in the past, but it was never developed and never proved to be working. So in this approach, we have this message, as I said, that we send to all the vehicles. And this is just like any other network message. So it has a signature that we have to verify. It has a timestamp that we want to check for freshness. And the first purpose of these heartbeats is to give a notion of time to all the vehicles, or all the TCs. So first of all, these messages are used for time synchronization. But they are also used, and of course, this also implies that there is an initial value in the trusted component, initial timestamp, because we don't have a trusted time source. This is given during initialization, which, for example, can be when the vehicle enrolls in the network. After that, the value is updated via the heartbeats. And also, the second purpose of these messages is to do revocation. So these messages contain a list of credentials to be revoked. And basically, the trusted component will just check if any of its credentials are in this list. If so, revocation will occur. If this message is not delivered correctly to the trusted component, there will be, of course, no revocation. And this is what the attacker wants, because the attacker here wants to continue operating the network, and avoid revocation as long as possible. But at the same time, there will be no time synchronization. So here is the idea that we find a way for guaranteeing a revocation even if these messages are not delivered. And if you see here, this diagram, there are two main scenarios. The first scenario is where the heartbeats are correctly delivered. In this case, there will be revocation. And then this means that there will be no valid signatures anymore in the subsequent messages. So this very easily, then the receiver just discards these messages. So this is what we want. In the case where the attacker tries to escape revocation, it means that these heartbeats are not delivered. Sorry. This means that the signature will also be valid, because there will be no revocation. So these credentials are still valid. But the timestamps in these messages will be eventually updated. which means that a receiver, again, has the ability to discard the messages. So in general, we have a time where the revocation authority decides to revoke the attacker, or credentials belonging to the attacker. And for some time, there will be heartbeats after that that are sent around, but we don't know if the attacker will process them or not. And for some time, the attacker will be able to continue operating, to send malicious messages, and the receiver will accept them. And this is something that we cannot avoid in any revocation scheme. There will always be some kind of time window where the attacker will continue to operate. But at some point, this will stop, either because of revocation or because of desynchronization of the attacker, so outdated timestamps used. And this time difference is something that we define as effective revocation time. So next, what we did was to formalize this model. And for this, we used Tamarin Prover, which is a symbolic verification tool for network protocols. And then we defined some properties about this design that we have. And the first property is about this effective revocation time. So on the left side, you can see that this is lemma as we defined in Tamarin. But you can just focus on the right side, where we have a translation, which is easier to understand. And this lemma says that if there is a revocation at a certain time t, a receiver will discard all the messages from the attacker as soon as the internal time of the receiver will reach t plus tv. So again, we have this parameter tv here, which is a tolerance defined before. So this means that we have now a specific time or an upper bound where after which the attacker will be considered revoked. But this time is for that particular receiver. And since we're using this synchronization scheme using heartbeats, all the receivers are not synchronized in the same way because there might be some delays in the network, so some receivers might be a bit behind, for example. So here we are making an assumption. If we assume that all the honest receivers are at most TV behind the time of the revocation authority, then we can define a global effective revocation time. This is valid for all the vehicles, all the honest vehicles in the network. And this would be equal to 2 times TV. So this gives an upper bound on revocation, something that we wanted to do, so the first goal. As for the second goal, we did some simulations using Kubernetes, in which we simulated a small V2X network, and with vehicles that communicate with each other. And we simulated also some real-world conditions like delays or interruptions, and also attackers that try to escape revocation by not processing these heartbeats. And in summary, we could verify that this scheme is still usable under these conditions. Revocation still works. And I will not focus more in details on this goal, but if you are interested, you can have a look at the paper for more information. As for the last goal that we have, efficiency, we have to consider here that we have a list of credentials that every time we want to revoke a credential, we add to this list. This means that this list might get quite big over time. And this is something that we want to avoid because of our goal. We want to keep the overhead small. So to solve this issue, we add a new check here, a new freshness check. So in this, now we are not only checking if the heartbeat is too old, as before, but also we are checking the other way around. What if the heartbeat is too new, according to the current time of the TC? In this case, we say that the TC is out of sync, and the heartbeats are not processed, are discarded. And here the TC will require some external resynchronization, for example, doing a re-enrollment step where it gets a new time. But why we do this? Because now we could define a new lemma in Tamarin. Again, look at the translation. This lemma says that if there is a revocation at time t, the attacker will not be able to process any heartbeats that contain a timestamp that is higher or equal than t plus tv. And this means also that for those heartbeats, we don't need to keep the credentials for that attacker in the list, because the attacker will not process these heartbeats. And then we can as well remove these credentials after this time has passed. So now what we are doing is that we are not only adding any more to the list, but we are also removing from the list. And this allows us to keep the size of these heartbeats reasonably small. And to prove this, we did some probabilistic evaluation, where we modeled this adding and removing elements from the list as a Markov model. We gave some probabilities, and then we defined some extreme scenarios with a lot of attackers in the network, a lot of revocations, and we could verify that even in those extreme conditions, in most cases, the size of this list remains reasonably small. Again, if you are interested, you can check the paper for more details here. So this work has some limitations. The first limitation is that we need a TC in every vehicle. Otherwise, our scheme will not work, quite simply. But this will also require changes in the V2X standards that we have currently, in the V2X protocols, because now we have a TC that we have to involve in every step of the protocols. And also we have to do some additional operations like, for example, attestation, if we have a TE. Another limitation that we have is that the vehicles require continuous connectivity to the infrastructure, because we have to distribute these heartbeats for time synchronization. But we can accommodate for offline periods of up to TV. So in the end, we have this parameter TV that pops up everywhere in this scheme. And you can see that in this diagrams that if TV is small, the effective revocation time will be small as well. But having a small TV also means that more resources are used and more availability guarantees are needed in the network for running up this scheme. So in the end, it's just about finding a trade-off between security, usability, and efficiency. So to conclude, we have a formally verified revocation scheme that is based on this self-revocation approach. We guarantee an upper bound on revocation time. And we have this parameter TV that gives a trade-off, so it can be fine-tuned according to the use case to provide the desired security and usability and efficiency guarantees. And finally, our artifacts are also open source, so you are free to have a look at them if you are interested. Thank you for your attention.
Hello, thank you for the talk. I have some question about your modeling in Tamarin prover. I would like to know if you have been able to take into account the dynamicity, because for vehicles, you know, they are moving and they are connecting, not connecting, and how you do that in this prover.
So basically what we did was modeling time in Tamarin, so to be able to calculate this revocation time. So just simply, if a vehicle is disconnected from a network, it means that this time increases. But what we proved in Tamarin is just that we have an upper bound on revocation time. I don't know if this answers your question.
How many vehicles do you have in your model?
In the model, we model just one TC and one generic verifier. And so, yeah, we have only proved that for one TC, and then we assume that this works also in general.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, Roland Yap from NUS. I was wondering why existing revocation schemes don't work. I mean, there are many works on revocation, not just the ones you mentioned.
Yeah. In V2X, we have really stringent real-time requirements. And for example, the US...
No, but in other uses of revocation, you also need real-time requirement.
Yeah, sure. But for example, in the US standards that's using this certificate revocation lists, the standard proposed this, but doesn't do any evaluation to actually verify that this scheme meets the standards.
But
So,
it will never scale, so
sorry?
it will never scale.
That's
Not to all the vehicles in the world.
Can you repeat, sorry?
It will never scale to all the vehicles in the world.
That's what we claim, yes.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, you have the European standard that doesn't use certificate revocation lists just for this purpose, for being more efficient, more scalable. But on the other hand, you have other issues. For example, this large time window where an attacker can continue to operate. So here we're trying to find like a trade-off between this active and passive revocation to give like the benefits of both, basically.
Right, and yeah, but I think there's many other, I mean, if you just look at standard revocation schemes, there are many others you didn't mention. But never mind, we can take offline. And then this tolerance parameter, I'm not sure whether there exists a tolerance parameter which is practical.
We did some evaluation here where we tried to evaluate the resource consumption or like even the size of these heartbeats according to that parameter. And here you can see that we evaluated values from 30 seconds up to 10 minutes, but this can be also higher according to the use case. But you have this constraints, let's say, that if this parameter is high, then also the time to revoke is high.
Right, but if the parameter is high, suppose your vehicle breaks down and so on, right? Then your revocation list becomes long because you do have a revocation list.
Yes.
Instead of heartbeat, right? So the revocation list can become arbitrarily long.
Not arbitrary.
Well, arbitrary based on the on the TV,
Yeah.
right?
As I said,
but
it's a
if
trade-off.
TV can be arbitrary, then the revocation list can be arbitrary, right?
As I said, that this parameter is chosen once by the system, and it doesn't change after it's chosen. But yeah, as I said before, it's just about finding a good trade-off according to the use case that you are considering.
Sure, we can take offline.
Thanks.
This final question.
Yeah, very quick question. Have you assumed whether or not, or have you considered whether or not the loss of heartbeats would cause any problem, like in transmission, loss of heartbeats because of transmission failures?
Yeah. As I said before, this here in the limitations, we need continuous connectivity, and we have this parameter TV that gives tolerance for offline periods. So if a vehicle is offline for up to this time, without processing any heartbeats, then there is no problem at all. Just after receiving the new heartbeat, it can synchronize the time. For longer periods, here, for example, if the vehicle just is shut off, when it comes back online, it has to go to the infrastructure, doing, for example, a re-enrollment or a lighter authentication step to get a new timestamp. And then it can continue to operate after that. So it's needed a new online step to get a new timestamp. Thanks.